Hello. Right then. I'm starting a little early, and the reason I'm starting a little early is because of this. We'll see 99 has left a very interesting comment. Now, on the on one of the videos I put up today, the one I put about where I was suggesting reserves as a capability. Now, the reason I am going to quickly answer his comment and then get on to questions and then get on to normal things is A, it's a lovely comment. B, he wanted me to read it so much, he posted it 4 times. So many times that actually YouTube thought it was spam. It was merely just taking ages to read it, I think, and then it decided that it was, because it was coming so many times, it was spam. I hope one has finally and actually has got through. If it hasn't, here is his comment here. And he does make some interesting points. He makes some points which I disagree with, but he makes some interesting points. And for starters, his first paragraph goes, "I'm sorry, Dr. Clark, but I think your reasoning on reserves, in particular maritime and air reserves, is wrong. By definition, a reservist is someone who has a civilian day job which pays their bills. Because those reservists need to keep a roof over their head, the amount of time they can give to the Royal Navy is limited. For every generated reservist filling a frontline role, you need between 10 and 20 people taking around account of their limited availability. Exacerbating this is that a great many reserves are public sector workers who cannot easily be pulled away from their day jobs except in small numbers." Right now. So I think what Will is not realizing he's doing is he's falling into a classic straw man argument here. Because I wasn't making the point at which those capabilities would be filled every single day. I was specifically said 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So, in the nicest way, let's say we do. The current vogue is to talk about the LPDs as gone, Albion and Bulwark. I hope they're not. But instead of them being going, because people go, right then, we only need amphibious lift capability about once every 20 years in terms of a large group. Well, we could make those ships reservists. Now, yes, they need about a 400-person crew. So maybe for reservists, we would need to recruit 800 plus reservists to be able to guarantee that capability's availability when we needed it. And we would need to activate it every year for exercise and these sort of things. But that doesn't make it silly, and that doesn't make it impossible. The thing is, if you're asking the reservists to fulfill a frontline ongoing role, that is not what reserves are for. They are for mobilization in major emergencies, in major wars. We've been stuck into the last few years of constant conflict in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the reserves have had to step in to fill those roles, and that has been very difficult. And they've done it very well with a very small number of reserves. And noticing I am suggesting increasing the reserves as well, which makes some of your other points slightly moot. But the point is that this is about building capability, and it's about retaining capabilities for those things which we don't need perhaps every single day, but when we do need them, we really do need them. Reserves can also be quite slow to generate, particularly if you need them to specific training courses before you can employ them. Well, most of the fleet goes through FOST and various other training before they actually go to get deployed. So that's not exactly something unusual. And also, again, this is only a big problem if you are worried about a Cold War scenario of war going in a couple of days, going from starting to nuclear. If you're talking about most wars, especially most major wars where we've seen mass mobilizations of large numbers of reservists, we're talking major conflicts. We're talking the Falklands, we're talking World War II, we're talking these sort of conflicts. Nicest way, you have weeks. You can do it. On the Type 23 stuff, I'm not going to get into that. I could get into about ship stresses, and we could talk about this for ages, but it's basically my view is I would prefer to have 6 reserve Type 23s than I'd reserve to have nothing. And honestly, if I had my choice, then what would happen is as time went on, the first batch of Type 31s would replace them, and the subsequent batches of Type 31s would be in service. So you'd actually have it go down, because the Type 31s are going to have about 100 regular crew. So that would be what I would do long term. I wouldn't be keeping those Type 23s for 30, 40 years in reserve. They would be the cover until we could get other ships. But it's an idea. And the thing is, I would prefer like a navy of 25 plus escorts. I don't think I'm going to get that. So I'm trying to figure out a way to keep the politicians happy and the nation secure, because the politicians want to spend money on the things which get the most people's attention. So that is going to be the NHS. That's going to be education. That's going to be things people deal with day to day. Defence has to make its case in that thing. I'm not going to get into your thing about the Harrier Force because, again, the Harrier Force was a political decision. It wasn't a strategic one. It wasn't a tactical one. It wasn't even a logistical one. It was the government's not willing to provide any more money, so therefore we have to go with the most financially acceptable choice. It's not a sensible choice. It's basically a finance is a limited one. So I don't agree with that. The P8. Well, you have quite rightly pointed out the flight deck crews can share with EasyJet and BA, but the skilled people in the back. The skilled people in the back sit and work on computer screens. They are doing their work on screens with information. I can't think of any way. Actually, I'm not going to be fatuous about this. I'm going to be serious about it. You can do that with computer-based. We already do most of their training already on simulators using computer screens doing that sort of training. We could do that for reservists. Already reservists can do that. So in the nicest way, that's just expanding that. And, that's the life. So, I can appreciate where you are coming from with respect to wishing to retain capabilities in service, but I disagree that reservists can feasibly be such a big part of the solution to a broad-based fighting Royal Navy. Try the Royal Navies of World War I, World War II, and the American Armed Forces as of today. The reserves make up a major part of these formations, and they are essential. And I know you've read Brian Lovery's book. Lots of people have. It's a lovely book. I don't agree with all the points in it, but I'm an academic and a naval historian. If I agree with all the points in every single book I read, I wouldn't be doing my job. And mainly the reason I write books is because I disagree with people. And I would say, personally, my own areas of specialty are destroyers, cruisers, and of the Fleet Air Arm when I've come across, these people who have been mobilized for wartime service. And they have done very well, and they have been very, very useful. Sloops are, massively. And the anti-submarine warfare in the Battle Atlantic was humongously fought by people who are wartime service only and reservists. They are critical people, and they have very useful skills. Now, I actually really like your comment. It made me think a bit more about what I was saying, and I hope you don't mind me responding this way, but honestly, I didn't have time to write a long enough reply in a decent time to you and also do this video, the live, which I'm now doing. So, Will, C99, thanks for the comment, and I hope that answers your points. Right then. Now, down goes that, and up goes that. I'm not sure how to skip to the interwar years, but we'll refresh it back to the World War I. We will remove the other one, and I will make sure that the questions are up. Hi, Osprey99, thank you. The rant is great. I try not to have a rant that often. I liked Wilty99's comment, but I wanted to point out there were some issues. Those are traditional perspectives. Those are what I come up with against a lot when I start talking about reserves being used for these things. And I understand where they come from. They're heartfelt. They are considered points. But they're honestly... they're not my style in terms of what I would say these things are for. And that should keep going. Right then, let's go through these. Hi, King George V. Hi, Daniel Freeman. Hi, Stephanie. Thank you it was a pleasure to redo part 3 of 4. And, the fluffy research assistant enjoyed it. Hi, Joe Richardson. King George V. Currently building a 1350H Illustrious. I know, it's a lovely build. Good luck with it. And painting it is so much fun. Because there are some very good books out there which have the painting instructions and all, and it's really good. Hi, Bitchin. Hi, Thomas Rottweiler. Hi, Albert. Hi, Kilo 19. We're 4 minutes early. Well, we're 4 minutes early because I wanted to answer Will C99. Jerison, pay reservists more, reimburse employers more. Yeah, it would cost money. It's not an easy system. I'm not saying it'd be easy or cheap, but it's the better system than having nothing. Hi, Tony Penfold. Hi, Blue Shirt Buddha. Hi, Ethan Hund. Hi, Stafford Thompson. Hi, Tis Francis Fault. Yes, what are we ranting about now? We're ranting about reservists. I love Flying Boats and Seaplanes. Well, we're going to be getting into those quite heavily. They are cool. They are so cool. Seriously, I saw one comment today, which was, if I had a lot of money, I would buy one of these and I'd fly around the world living it. I'm sort of going, yes, that is my dream now. That is what I want to do. Have one and fly around the world living it. Jerison, just a reminder that the Army hired Bohemian Interactive to make BAF. I think they've gone different right now with lower system requirements. Probably. And hello to my family who are watching, my lovely girlfriend and her lovely family who are also watching. Hello to the fluffy research assistant who I know is watching, complaining downstairs because he's not on here. Good evening, Carl. Good evening, Brock. Good evening, Jay. Daniel Freeman, good response. Arguments on exchange of views and points and rants are less organised and more an attack on the person rather than the topic. Well, Will's point was a good one. I have to admit, he did manage, the first reading through, he did kind of raise the red rag to the bull, because it was the one thing you never ask an academic is, have you read a book? And that's sort of the academic version of a massive put down. But I remember that Will's probably not an academic, or even if he is, he probably didn't mean it that way. So I just sort of thought, right then, I'm going to react and I'm going to be nice about this. But academic version of academic rudeness is quite strange. It takes swearing at each other all this, and that's just us being friendly. Saying things like, have you read a book or have you read the article is sort of the academic version of, yeah, you haven't because you're dumb. And it's not what Will meant. But, it's the culture and where you come from, so how you interpret things sometimes. Shumack, we don't have to use 90-day workers when needed officers. Sam Thompson, Doug Clark, on poor endurance, my old 76 Ford sedan got 3 hours 30 minutes from 60 litres of fuel. Still a fun car, yeah. Trent Turing, you did some nice intro videos. Thanks for the effort. I'm trying, and today's one has a lot of pictures in it. So it's going to be going through, and I'm going to be talking a bit about them. But it's so cool. Seriously, Flying Boats Seaplanes, they were so useful. Marlon Sims, evening all, minor blood pressure doc. I am. I've got iron brew. Tony Penfold, work got in the way of homework. That's terrible, Tony. Sometimes the reply was well worth a live chat. That would have taken too long for even for Dragons. I was working how to type it out and before this, and I just thought I couldn't do that. Joe Richardson, the Sunderland is a fantastic airplane, was key in saving thousands of sailors in both war and peace. Even more so when you consider how much of a deterrent to U-boats and condors it was. That it certainly was. And Greg says, evening, Dr. Clark. All. Evening, Greg, and evening, Gold Neil. Can we really use flying boats as gunships? Well, evening, Eamon, and yes, you could. When you look at some of the weights they were lifting off the ground, seriously, it's immense. And the more I was going through the flying boats, the more I was thinking, why don't more nations have these today? They're cool. Ian-Car, interested to see photos online showing the use of dazzle camouflage on a fuselage of a Felixstowe 2B flying boat. Yes, the Felixstows had dazzle. Seriously, World War I Felixstowe's got to so much. If you haven't read it, I've got it sitting around me somewhere. Yeah. These books, they are fantastic. They really are fantastic. This one, super cool. This one, amazingly cool. And you'll probably notice the picture of it. It is the Dazzle Camouflage Felixstowe F2. And it's cool. It's just lovely cool. Stafford Thompson at Dr. Clark. How about ground effect aircraft for literal fast response? It's tempting, but they are quite complicated. Electroplanes I was looking at, and yeah, they're just a bit complicated. Sure, what would you do for expansion of forces in the event of war? We have the security and the training units, which I guess could help with the army, but Navy is tech. That is the thing. Tech is the complicated one, but also tech is Britain's strength. which is the kind of interesting I've been looking around at it. And I've been thinking about this when we're talking about the way the Royal Naval Air Service expanded or grew in World War One. The Royal Navy was literally going to the industries where these people worked and going, well, hi, you. And then the Army didn't. They just went to their traditional sources, and then they went, Royal Flying Corps isn't doing as well as the Royal Naval Air Service. I wonder why. It's because the Royal Navy gets special treatment, and the Royal Navy's going, no, we just had the people who could do it. Speaking of float planes, a major driver of the planes was the Schneider Trophy. The downside was the engines they developed were complex, race-bred engines, making them vulnerable and expensive for war. Yes, and just wait till we get to them. Because the nation which was most subject to the Schneider Trophy and all its issues were the Italians. That's where most of their problems lie, because the Italians... the poor, they get snackered in because it's I call it the Lamborghini or the Ferrari effect. I think they look so beautiful, they look so great, they must be going to be great fighters. And you're sort of going, well, yes, when you can mother it and basically treat it like the equivalent of a thoroughbred racehorse, it will be great. When you have to survive a war zone with it, it's just not fun. Afternoon, Jeff. Sure, Matt. Officers just need to be people managers who understand the techies tell them large extent and make a few decisions. Might be easier to train. Tempting. There are certain models which do work. For including people. Albert Sapsy. Also, seen those pics of Felix AF2 in black and white stripes. Found drawings also in red and white, blue and white. What's the origin of this camo? It looks awesome. Well, the idea was that you would break up the image of the aircraft. So you'd make it more difficult for people to work out the range to you. Because when you're using visual, especially sort of visual aiming systems, especially the long-range visual aiming systems which are used on ships, etc., and for artillery systems at this time, they work to provide you a distance by matching up images. So if you have different sort of patterns of camouflage and it all sort of odd shapes, it breaks up and sort of makes it more difficult for someone to match up those two images. That's the idea. Doesn't always work that well, but also it looks pretty cool as well. Sure, Mac, Dan Freeman. The idea is to position with a trained reserve so that you don't have to be in a US position during World War II, where people were given command after 90 days. Yeah. Stuart Thompson talks about, yes, they're still a bit squirrely. On choppers replacing the flying boat seaplane, I thought choppers really liked to turn turtle when on the water. The thing is, what they do is they hover and they drop down a rope to pick the people up. Whereas the flying boat used to land and then motor over to you, which was quite cool. Sort of, it was your flying taxi. Land, motor over. You probably were in the moment when you were in the water wasn't as good. And of course, that means it has to be a fairly calm sea state. It can't be the roughest sea state for it to pick you up. Whereas a chopper can pick you up in any sea state, pretty much. CC, there is advantages to the chopper, but the seaplane just looks cooler. Vision. Flying around the world in flying boat in retirement is being Porco Rosso. I love the Porco Rosso. If anyone hasn't seen Porco Rosso, you've got to. It's some beautiful drawings. Jefferson, Tav Thompson talks about, let's not start me on endurance. I have a Defender 110 DCV with 5 litre V8 rotor generating. I got a whole 9 miles per gallon once. And you see, here's my Subaru Impreza, which does 300 miles to a tank of petrol. It's quite good. Paul's Axe. Flying boats became a star subject due to the severe lack of airfields, particularly anywhere in the world in the early 20th century. After World War II, airfields were readily available everywhere. Yes, they were. And designing an aircraft to make use of a bomber airfield is easier than designing an aircraft to land and take off of water. But still, saying that, You see, I've been more and more thinking about it from the perspective of ecotourism, because if you look at some of the places around the world which don't want cruise liners to come there, they don't want to build an airfield because that uses up special precious land spaces. They don't want to damage the coral. They don't want to damage all those sorts of things. A flying boat makes an awful lot of sense. If you want to bring ecotourism to the world, the flying boat is the option. And also, because most of them are propeller powered, but if there's anything more suitable to turning into an electric drive, it's the propeller powered aircraft. I think that is an option, but honestly, people aren't looking at that moment. Right. The Germans complained that their Italian planes were too complex. The Germans. Yeah. The Italian race planes were cool. Ian Cart, consolidated PBY Catalina capabilities were amazing. Shame no turboprop version. Actually, there were all sorts of versions of the Catalina considered, including, I think, one 4-engine version, which was just... But no, a turboprop, I think they might have actually considered a turboprop. I seem to remember a version of turboprop, but it would have been a really cool system to have a turboprop system. Jeff Beeler, UK flying boats used recoilless rifles in World War One. UK flying boats in World War One used pretty much anything they could get their hands on. And there's even stories of them in World War II managing to get their hands on 40mm. So there is a unverifiable account of a Sunderland deciding to turn herself into an early version of a Spectre gunship, firing 40mm cannon out of the waist position. We can all be very afraid at the idea of a Sunderland turned into a Spectre gunship. Jennifer Stromack, the UK had similar problems with getting officers, but added class considerations too. P.S. Commandant officers is techies told me by a couple of iron weapon system engineers. The interesting thing is, yes, but the class system actually didn't cause as much problem for the RN as people sometimes think. The reason I say that, on the British military sometimes think, is because the British also had the huge number of grammar schools. And quite a lot of the grammar schools students as well became officers, as well as the kids, honestly, mostly from the private schools. And quite a lot of good officers came up there. Plus, you have things like the Royal Navy and its history of promoting ability. And the Royal Navy's had several admirals who've gone the whole way through, even quite early on, from seaman to full admiral. So, there is a history there which the Royal Navy was prepared to exploit. All right. In Jeff Beeler, in World War I, sea landing ability meant you could land and fix your aircraft rather than ditching. Yes. That is very, very useful. And it was very critical for North Sea fights. Turning 3434. I was confused by the Dutch roundel at first, but I have been properly informed considering the W12. Yes, the W12 is a rather interesting aircraft. The fact that it basically one crash lands off the coast of Netherlands, it sort of has to put down. It gets into Netherlands, and they play around with it for the remainder of the war. And then when the war's over, they go to Germany and go, "We really like this. Can we build some? Please, can we build some?" And they build them. The W-12 is one of those lovely little aircraft to fly, and a couple were captured by the, I think it's the British at the end of the war, and they are used by the Royal Air Force, and again, they really like them. The pilots who put in them really do like them. They're really nice to fly, apparently. Thomas Ryler, will you be covering French seaplanes in live? There were a great many of them. There are only so many I can get done in 2.5 hours. So I have focused on the ones which I can get done as soon as possible. I think, however, due to the outpouring of love for them, that this is going to be a subject I'm going to return to in future. It's certainly a beloved topic, and it's certainly a forgotten one. I do recommend tracking down a guy called Alex Howlett, though, if you're really interested, because he does so much. He does do some on this, which is some really cool stuff. I don't know how much he's published. I don't think he's published a book yet, but he does do some really good stuff. Jeff Beeler, why did Churchill send trained R&R staff into actions in infantry in 1914? Seems a waste of trained staff. It was a waste of trained staff, but the army was short of troops, and sailors were used to fight, had been used to fight in wars, in Boxer Rebellion, all sorts of things. So it wasn't unprecedented for a Royal Navy division to be formed and sent in. Gordon Collins, but how big is the fuel tank? I think you're talking about my Impreza, and I can't remember off the top of my head, actually. But she does go 300 miles, which is quite nice. Carbon Gasbert, it's in the Adriatic. torpedo boats worked rather coordinated. For an air attack, they towed the listeners out and in, or just refueled and maybe rearmed them in target vicinity. So the Adriatic is fun. I think the Adriatic is going to have to be a special. The more I looked into it, the more I decided that the Adriatic in terms of the involvement of flying boats in Model 1 is something which is far too much than I can cover while doing all the rest stuff properly. I'm going to talk about it a little bit, but, you know. Then from Dr. Clark, Orion needs flying boats for carry-on-board delivery role for QE, plus can slap on a radar for free for AEW and get them refueling the F-35Bs, long-range ASW. Yeah, you could do all that. Now, here is the Italian Schneider trophy, and the Macchi M67, which I think looks a bit like the plane which Porco Rosso uses, and the Macchi M67 I've got two pictures of it from 19. Hang on. I think one of them's the Macchi M72. I think I've mislabeled the pictures. I do apologize for that. But anyway, the Italians produce these brilliant Schneider Trophy entrants. They are beautiful aircraft. They are gorgeous aircraft, and they basically prove that float planes can be fast, can be beautiful, can be sexy. Let's be honest, they are. That red one is particularly gorgeous. I feel like a bit like Jeremy Clarkson and James May and Richard Hammond discussing this, but by God, is that red one cute. You can see where Ferrari and all the rest come from in Italian history. JP, during World War II, the USN Seabees could build airfields faster than almost anywhere. Liberators, but beat Catalinas. Yes, but they still have to build the airfield, whereas with the Catalinas, they don't have to build it. And also, you can't put a bomb in a Catalina's airfield. It can just float around it. Jay Richardson. Also, I've been looking at the Windsor engine. Okay, no. So, Jeff Beeler, the Italian Navy Air Arm effectively becomes the technical backbone of the Italian Air Force. No staff left over for Navy to build, hence no carrier. No, it's also because it's going to sound strange. Building an aircraft carrier for the Italians, right then, where's the fleet going to operate that is not going to have air support from land? In the 1920s and 30s, when you've got flying boats moving around and they're able to support them, and you've got all the air bases being constructed, where is the Italian fleet going to support? Now, we all know the reality is that actually it doesn't work. That the aircraft might be able to reach you, but they can't stay over you, and they have to go back to rearm and refuel. So we know the organic reasons for why you have an aircraft carrier, for why you need air power. But in 1920s, 1930s, the world is still developing. They don't know that. They don't know the reason they have to have aircraft carriers. And so, you don't. And you have these lovely flying boats going around anyway. Schumacher, is there anything cool that cooler than a flying boat with 40 millimeter? Answer: the answer is a flying boat with twin 40 millimeters. Sam Thompson, yes, the Pantera is a rare beast. I meant, okay. there's a car discussion going on here, which is pretty cool. In-car, short 184 World War I float plane, not mentioned. Flying at Jutland and an original fuselage now at FAA Museum, Yeovil, New York. Yeah, UK. Yes, it is. And the reason it's not mentioned is because I was mainly looking at the World War I ones from these. But that is one of the interesting what-ifs of Jutland, is if the radios had worked and they managed to communicate, how would that have affected the battle? It's a cool what-if to think about. Might it made up for a beatie? You can never know. JBL, a good technical service is good, going to value ability over class. One reason the British beat the Germans, who created a separate technical officer corps. Yeah, that and a few other ones. I have to say, the Kwanski H6K is a really cool aircraft. But I do worry about the namings that they have for them. Calling it Mavis just seems a little bit cruel. It just seems cruel. Trent Telenko, are you going to touch on how the various fleets use their seaplane tenders, like the IJN cruiser tenders, tone and children versus the USN RN tenders? Yes, I'm going to talk about that a bit in a second. I believe you have a 45 litre. It's an estate. I would call it. It's called a wagon, so I think it's the estate, Stafford. JP, 8 days is fast. Now, from wouldn't a seaplane be a great placement for Nimrod? Easier to spur us to prevent preemptive strikes and have secondary search and rescue role. We've gone with the P8. The P8's very good for what's available. I think that I like the Japanese system of having some of them. I think they could be quite interesting. Right then, let's go through 253. 3434. I had to learn a Poco Rosso due to you. I had to learn. Yes, we all love a bit of Miyazaki time. Thomas Rutler, the wiki page for Mackie M67 says both photos are M67. Well, it could be both are M67, but I swore one looked like the M72 to me. No. I've spent so much long looking at the Miyake's photos. It's just cool. Chef Thompson, the Mackie M is one should think when thinking fast float planes. Mackie Schneider trophy planes. Paint them red to make them go faster. Tempting. Jeff Beeler, Sunderland officially got 4 303 machine guns fixed firing forward, added by the end of World War II. Officially. Jeff Beeler, racing aircraft need to stand out, and red is else Italy's official racing colour. Yeah, that it is. Mavis. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. Mitchell, if memory serves, using flyboats for torpedo attacks was part of USN's War Plan Orange for Pacific War before World War II. Yes, it was. And Danny Friends, wouldn't seaplanes be a great replacement for Nimrod? I've already seen that. Right. So let's. And now I've put up the questions. So you have two types of ideas of how your tenders are going to operate. Some fleets, the IJN, are looking at this. Is that your tender keeps up with your force. Your flying boat can fly ahead, come back, recover, refuel, rearm, go off. So almost it's operating like a carrier with the fleet. With other navies, the flying boat tender operates on destroyer flotilla lines. It moves to a place, it sets up there, the flying boats operate out from there. So it's sort of like you're putting this there, and that's your sentry. So it's sort of like it creates a mobile base, a mobile air base. And both systems are actually quite clever. I have to say myself, if I'm going for the first system, I wonder why you're not getting a proper carrier. In case of the Japanese, it was because they wanted them for reconnaissance, and they thought it was better for them long-range reconnaissance if they were using that, and then allowed the carriers to focus on strike. I can understand that policy. I'm not sure I agree with it, but I can understand that policy. With the British and Americans, it's far more a case of this is your area search tool. You put it down in the area, it's searching. It's kind of like an earlier version of Well, what we use satellites for these days. But it's cooler than satellites, let's be honest. Satellites are quite cool, but not Seaboat Catalina cool. Oh god, it's the Dornier Doax. Sorry. I have a great respect for a lot of these aircraft, but that is one which, honestly, I saw one comment where someone was going, they're building it so heavy that it needs to have all these engines to fly it because the engines weigh so much anyway. And I actually worked out that it probably went away and worked out that probably one of those, at least one of those engines, are literally there to lift the weight of the other engines. Then you've got, to provide enough force to lift the weight of the other engines. It's just, eee. So I think 300 miles to my 45-litre tank is pretty good then. Yes. I love my little Subaru. It needs to be cleaned. I do admit that. The fact it hasn't been moved around a lot means it hasn't been taken to where it goes to get itself washed. I have a lovely car wash people I go to down not far from me who wash the car very nicely, paint the tyres and everything, while I usually am taking my mum around the Epsom town centre and helping her with her shopping. Or taking her out to lunch. I try to earn some brownie points occasionally. It helps for when I'm, as you can probably tell, has been spending a few weeks basically staring at a computer screen, writing and ignoring everyone. Helps if there are some brownie points banked up. Jerison, surely something along the lines of a Martin P6M Seamaster jet seaplane would be ideal for SAR. There are so many. The jet plane versions of some of these aircraft was just cool. I was looking at them going, you can use a jet? Yes. And they really do come through. A lot of jets really do come through. Let's see. I've got a picture of one somewhere I can add up here. Right. Sorry about this. I've stored a whole load of pictures away. Right. It's always fun. You store them nice and neatly, and then you go, hang on, which one's which? Because they're all this. I should just have them on visible pictures, shouldn't I? That would make the life more sensible. It's on here somewhere. And before anyone jokes about it, there was actually a Spitfire float plane version trialed between 1940 and 1942. I still cannot understand that to the life of me. But they did. Yes. Well, while I'm hunting it, I will hunt it in a second, but I'll answer the questions first. These are, of course, the fairy swordfish, the slider trophy, where the Spitfire comes in. Because Mitchell designs seaplanes, he designs all these things, but he suddenly decides, right, I designed all these China trophy aircraft, hence the SB6. I can design a fighter. I can design a really good fighter. So he does. And it becomes the Spitfire. Jeff Biller, 3 planes for 3 different jobs: spotting, attack, and long-range reconnaissance. Well, as I said, the swordfish replaced multiple roles. And once you had the Supermarine Walrus involved as well, you'd basically taken out 4 roles with 2 aircraft and used the same engine for both. Jeffy, the Japanese were the last flying boat users. No, they still have them. So did the Chinese for Star. They still do have flying boats, and they still do use them for anti-submarine warfare and search and rescue. Inkar, why was the RN using at least 3 catapult launch aircraft inside of World War II? Seafox, Swordfish, Floatplane, and Walrus. Well, principally because they had different weights of catapult and not all have been upgraded. So the Seafox could be taken by the lighter ones only. Lighter ones could only take Seafox. Pretty much all of them could take Swordfish, and it could stand up to all of them, and all heavy ones could take the Walrus, providing them launching enough power to launch effectively. How effective were they in rough seas? I imagine North Sea would frequently be too rough landing. You need decent weather reporting. You had all that, but usually they managed to make it okay. As long as they could make it to some sort of fairly shallow places, they can land in quite short run of water. So they could often land inside harbours if they need to, or in river estuaries. Thomas Riley, using Japanese seaplanes tender as a base works well in the Pacific Islands where there isn't space to build airfields, or you want a temporary base. Yep. Dornier DOX allowed UK to sell lots of Jupiter engines to Germany. This was the first problem. The Germans are importing engines and its Bristol Jupiters from the UK. I think they're Bristol Jupiters, anyway. I seem to remember it's Bristol Jupiters, yeah. I don't think it's a Rolls-Royce Jupiter, is it? Oh god, my brain's gone blank. I'm sure someone will tell me here correctly if I get it wrong. Okay. There wasn't even DC sea-free planes trialed. Oh, good lord. Strawmac, there was a float plane version of the Wildcat. There is a sort of version of the Wildcat which goes around, which can do float plane work. Here is sort of. And they're pretty cool. That's it. That's what I was hunting for. Leave that for a second. Add source. Streams generation. Right then. There you go. This is a Saunders Row, and it's one of the coolest I could think of in terms of jet-powered seaplane. And it was considered by the RAF as an interceptor, as a basis for an interceptor, which could be deployed to areas where they couldn't build airstrips, pretty much. And this was at the beginning of the Cold War. It was being looked at. End of World War II, beginning of the Cold War. And it looks really, really cool. Tony Pemberton, where can I find adaptations made to the flying porcupines? I have a model kit I can build. I found most of my stuff in this book and a few others like it, which have all sorts of things in them. The actual one with the actual short Sunderland modifications, I cannot see it at the moment. It's around somewhere. But they are very, very cool, and they have a lot of information in them, and they're an entire series. they had a lot of experimentation. Basically, the float planes could have a lot of experimentation. Now, the interesting facts about the Saunders Roe, which I'm just going to get into because I'm just going to talk about it because it's so cool. And I'm so sad it wasn't produced more. There was literally, I think there's only 1 or 2 copies, 3 copies built. And it had a gross takeoff weight of 7.25 tons. Its power plant was 2 Metropolitan Vickers Beryl turbojets, maximum speed of 512 miles per hour or 445 knots, endurance of 1 hour and 48 minutes, service ceiling of 48,000 feet, and it was armed with 4 20mm Hispano cannons, could carry 8 rockets and 2,000-pound, that's 455 kilogram bombs. It was also test flown by Eric Winkle Brown. And there is one, the first prototype is actually on display in the Solvent Sky Aviation Museum in Southampton. So if any of you are ever near Southampton, that is a very cool aircraft to go and look at. And it's certainly something worth a look at. Right then, now I have the Seaford now up here and the Supermarine Walrus. Walrus I've already talked about a bit. But I would say the Seaford is possibly one of my favorite planes because basically it's the modification of the Sunderlands, but official modification of the Sunderlands. Right, okay. Tenchelenko, the DC free float plane construction number CN11761 was delivered to US Air Force in 1943. General Kenny wanted them for New Guinea operations. That would make sense and would be very useful. Dennis Freeman, could you take off and land one of those Saunders Roes on the Rhine and other German rivers? Another option for dispersed ops in the Cold War? Well, pretty much. I think you could, actually. Let's see. It doesn't list the takeoff length like it does on other aircraft I've read in my notes, so obviously I've seen them. But yeah, it's fairly cool. It's a very cool idea, I think. Actually, I like them. I have a growing soft spot for flying boats and seaplanes. There's something so nice about them. And as I said, ecotourism keeps bringing into my mind at the moment, going, this is a great way for doing it, and also it provides a reason to protect areas of coral. Oh, you can't touch that area. That's the landing strip area, so you can't go up there fishing boat because that's where the planes come in. You know, it's a great use of resources. Busher Butter, why did you leave out the Vought Kingfisher? It was the USN's primary reconnaissance aircraft aboard battleships and cruisers in World War II. Truly a great aircraft. Mainly because I wanted to talk about the Curtiss Seagull. That was it. I'm honest about it. I wanted to talk about the fact that there were many planes out there which were biplanes and which were in use throughout World War II, and I just wanted to do. I just sort of thought, right then, I can do this and I can pick what I like in a way. It's a good. I like the Kingfisher, but I felt the Seagull was the better option for me to talk about that. But the Kingfisher's cute. It is the primary float plane for much of the USN for much of the time. It's along with the Seagull and later on the Seahawk. So there's a couple of them going around, and I chose the Seagull. Now, here we have my other two friends, Emily and Ruth. Oh my. It's just so, They're cute aircraft. What did they do to them? Why do this to them? Sean Mack, it looks like a really fat meteor. I'm presuming this is on talk about at Saunders Roe, and it was a bit of one. A bit of one. Vision. USN built a strategic bomber flying boat during Cold War, the Martin P-6M Seamaster. They built a few before the project cancelled in 1959. Yes, they did. And they were cool as well. Sarah Thompson, Dr. Clark. My professor at college told me that one of the main problems with jet-powered flying boats, floatplanes, was maintenance. Between turbine wear and stress on the airframe, they wouldn't last. It was certainly an issue with the metallurgy at the time. Okay, the metallurgy at the time and what they were going with. But saying that, what we could achieve today would definitely be far better. And also, the propeller-powered ones actually did last for quite a long time. Some of them were operating for 30, 40 years. So I think there is, sometimes it's a bit overblown in terms of the reality of that. Make sure I'm still in the picture. You might have noticed things have changed around about. Now, here is my personal, as you've guessed from it from seeing the things, bête noire. So, the A6M is the 0. The A6M2 is the not 0. So, we have an aircraft which, as we all know, has enough trouble because it isn't armoured and in terms of it's put everything on speed. Okay, the 0. And it does quite well to begin with at the beginning wall, but once you have tactics down, it's in trouble. So you take the 0 and you convert. Its test flights the 7th December 1941. By 1942, when it comes in, okay, the 0 is hotness. I do understand that. But I still do not understand this idea that you turn an aircraft, which is entire purpose is built around being light and fast, into a float plane. Look at those differences in statistics. That's 20 knots lost off cruise speed. That's 53 knots lost off maximum speed. And a little bit higher altitude, yes, for it to get there as well. Range has dropped by a whopping nearly 400 nautical miles. The ferry range has dropped by nearly 700 miles. More than that. The service ceiling is theoretically the same, and I say theoretically the same because I believe those statistics, like I believe the concept that there is... I'm trying to remember, my cousins are watching this, so I can't use that one, that one, or that one. I believe that, like I believe that I will get milk chocolate cookies tomorrow morning for breakfast. Just not going to happen. There's none in the house. I've checked. And more importantly, time to altitude. Okay, this is quite important. So this will take 6 minutes 43 seconds to get to 16,000 feet. 16,400 feet. Okay? This is why I don't believe it actually makes it up to 33,000 feet, partially. The time for the A6M to get to 20,000 feet is 7 minutes and 27 seconds. That's a lot faster climbing. A lot faster. Jerison, wait, the Sunderland went out of service in 1948, but the Walrus in the 50s. I thought the Sunderland rescued the crew of the airliner the Chinese downed in the 50s. Probably did. It went out of service with the armed forces, but they went into service with the British Overseas Air Corporation, the BOAC, and they were still doing work for them into the 50s, so it could well have been one around and called up. Gordon Collins. I went to the Solent Sky Museum last year. Well worth a visit, and they also have one of the Supermarine S6 family. Oh, cool. Jeff Wheeler. Escort carriers replaced flying boats in many roles during World War II. Mobile airfields. Exactly. They do. But that doesn't mean that flying boats aren't cool. Greg Sowski. Seaplanes and flying boats are common in the Pacific Northwest and Caribbean for island hopping. They are. Golden Eagle. How about building flying boat tenders? They weren't so difficult. Mostly they were conversions of merchant ships or old cruisers or all sorts of things, and they were quite good. Vision. Disruptable. No, it was jet powered, but hang on. Skipped it. It was jet powered, but ballistic missiles launched from nuclear subs led to the P-6M Seamaster's cancellation, giving the USN its desired strategic mission. Ah, yes. Jeff Wheeler, flying boats were used in the Caribbean until the airframes wore out for the venture tourist industry. Yeah, doesn't surprise me. Carl and Gasman, Sunderland supplied West Berlin during the blockade with salt. That doesn't surprise me. They could carry a lot of that. Jerison, I read somewhere that the HK8's range was due to lack of structural members. Apparently, when they hit, they would simply disintegrate. That is one of the things which goes around about them. I'm not so sure, because looking at the framing and the structure of it, I don't think that's the case. However, they did have a slight issue in that to make the underside as strong as possible, some of the top framing seems to be a little bit weaker than I would prefer. So I'm wondering if it depends on which point you hit it at. I think if you're hitting on the top, you can possibly, especially if you're firing enough shots at it from enough angle, from the right angle, you can do some severe damage. Right then. Calvin Gasmet, hope we do not leave out the Arado 196. Actually, we have left out the Arado 196 because I covered it so much in the Battle of the River Plate stuff. As I said, there's only so much I can get done in 2.5 hours, or even in what worked out as about 2 hours worth, or 2 hours and about a few minutes worth of introduction videos. So nearly 5 hours worth of videos today on this topic. Jeffy, look, Wildcat on escort carrier beats a Roof A6M2N on floats. In the nicest way, a swordfish beats an A6M2N on floats. Seriously, I am fairly certain. Considering how many swordfish managed to take out Focke-Wulf F-190s and ME-109s in World War II, it seems, once you look through the statistics, I think actually a A6M2 on N on floats is gonna go down. Definitely to a Hellcat or a Wildcat or a Corsair, a Fairey Fulmar, pretty much you name the Allied fighter. It's not going to have fun. Trent Langer, Curtis SC-1 Seahawk could outclimb the F6F Hellcat from 0 to 6,000 feet and carried lightweight ASV and interception set. It was replaced by helicopters post-war. Yeah, and it was very cool. Excellent. I believe that, I believe a very unbelievable thing. Last one. Ian-Carr, re-roof. UK changed swordfish into float plane. The swordfish was always the swordfish was always designed to be able to be a float plane. They actually had the floats built, and they could be attached on to the same place where the wheels were. So it was always available. And I did show some pictures of them earlier. Let's go back to that. There you go. Float plane swordfish on HMS Melair. They were quite often used for battleship ones, it seems. Their battleships did rather like them, especially the Queen Elizabeth class. Grace Sean Mack, that the Japanese actually want helicopter destroyers. That's why they have them, but still they have flying boats. They're quite cool. Disrespectful. Seaplane fighters seem like a bad idea in general. I have to say, of the seaplane variants, they're the ones in First World War. They are definitely understandable. In the First World War, they are all the rage, and they are very good, and they are very useful. In World War II, it's a bit more difficult, and especially as time goes on. No. Danny Phillips, the only reason I can think of for Float Plane Zero is for defending islands you can't build airfields on. Even then, it's not a very good reason. There are several other options. There's the, I think it's the A5, which is the fighter prior to the Zero, which would have been quite fine to convert to a float plane. I'd have given it the newer engine, upgraded its horsepower, and taken the stronger frame and used that for a float plane. I think that would have made more sense. Generation Incar, just remember, everyone on this channel, myself included, thinks stringy boys are great planes. String bags are great planes. Angus Sono. If you give us your shipping address, we can send you breakfast cookies. Did Arado 196 fly off on the ground and spray? No, reading that the cylinders would crack, but that was water hitting hot coal, but just switch off out of water. Okay, the Arado 196 was actually critical to grass space operations. It couldn't have done all it did without it. But the trouble is, by the time it came to River Plate, it was not working anymore. They had gone down the sea. I think we've left with two of them. They'd cut spare parts, but the AR-196 was a notoriously intensive aircraft to maintain amongst float planes. It was basically, the Germans were going for the best float plane they could build, whereas the British, as typified by the Swordfish, the Walrus, and various other ones, were basically going for something which is virtually indestructible. I.e., it can literally keep flying, held together by toothpaste and hope. Whereas the AR-196 requires maintenance, quite a lot of heavy-duty stuff, regularly, to keep it happy. And new parts. Not just parts which have been taken down to the machine shop on the ship and given a good clean, but actual new parts. Lucia Bird, that's right. What about the Convair F2Y Sea Dart, jet-powered fighter on twin hydro skis? Truly a unique concept. It was the only seaplane to exceed the speed of sound. And it was beautiful. Again, I've got this picture elsewhere somewhere. Let me just track it down. The F2Y Sea Dart always looks to me like it's sort of some sort of Blackbird forerunner. Where have I saved the picture? Ah, there it is. Look at that gorgeous aircraft. And that's its skis deployed. And it was an interesting scenario of how it would take off and how it would land. It's a very kind of clever and novel concept. But the trouble is, when you're doing clever and novel concepts at this time, unless it has an immediate payoff, it ain't going to get developed. David, what Rilo said, Sea Turkey, which was a float plane based before the airfield on Guadalcanal could be finished. Yeah. Martin Doherty, that's clear. I know we have the P8, but would it not be an idea for the UK to purchase or buy several seaplanes for reserves and to give us another platform for ASW, If there's one available and in production, yes. But the trouble is, if we have to go it alone, there's no point. If we have to go it alone, it's better to have reserved P8s. And the only real option is the Japanese one, and that's not being produced in a lot of numbers at the moment. If more people start to buy it and it really is becoming a wider use of the system, then maybe. Was it me or did you leave out the PBM Mariner? Yes, I did leave out the PBM Mariner because there are literally hundreds, possibly low thousands of float planes and seaplane designs. There is only so many hours in a day, or a video more likely. Just checked. An RAF Sunderland was dispatched from RAF Katai in Hong Kong to rescue 1954 Cathay Pacific Douglas DC-4 shutdown and was joined by US Air Force Grumman S-16 Albatross. That's interesting. They are not supposed to be in service by then, so obviously some actually did keep in service. I have no idea. Sure, Matt, God forbid a sea fire finds a roof. That would not be pretty. It wouldn't be pretty. Sure, Matt, I was referring to something that you don't believe, i.e. the Japanese were just going to use those destroyers for helicopters. Yes, that's something I definitely don't believe. In car, during Berlin airlift, Sunderland's landed on the British Berlin lakes. Yep, they did. Senpai, would the Caspian Sea Monster and Arachnoplanes be considered a flying boat, or should they be a different category for waterborne ground effect vehicles? You just answered your own question. Waterborne ground effect vehicles. They are different from flying boats. They are very cool, though. Stephen White, Gladiators had float versions. Yes, they did. So many things had float versions. The Hearts had float versions. Then if you Clark, given the USN's drive to get to a single carrier aircraft type, would they go for a float plane, F-18E, or F-35? Honestly, with the F-35 skin, I don't think a float plane is in its future. So I am going to go with, they would go with a F-18, because that would make sense. But oh my, that would be fun. Definitely fun to see. Definitely fun to watch. Right. Would it have been realistically possible to drop off squadron or torpedo-armed seaplanes into the sea and used as an ambush unit? Yes, and the Royal Navy tried it in World War One, and it may have worked once or twice, but not. It was unfortunately they never managed to get it on the major kill. If they managed to get it in line for High Seas Fleet, it could have been interesting. But by the point they were ready to do it, the High Seas Fleet they weren't coming out to sea. Ken McQuarrie, but would it make sense logistically to convert A5M into a float plane instead of the A6M? In the nicest way, the Japanese are not really thinking logistically. They are building 18-inch gun battleships. They're not thinking with their logistics brain on. I don't think I have to worry about logistics when suggesting what else would be sensible. But possibly, logistically, you are right, okay? A6M is probably sensible. But that's about the only grounds. And as the A5M was still in operation quite widely, and they could have converted the aircraft rather than building new aircraft, there is the strategic and the infrastructure reasons for going with the A5Ms. Plus, they have a lot of supplies for them still around. Thomas Ryland, Iron ship catapults. Were they standardized so any seaplane could use them, or did some planes only work with specific catapults? Some planes only work with specific catapults, mainly not because the mount wasn't standardized, but because their actual strength of the catapult, the amount of force it could use to launch the aircraft, wasn't all the same, as they would have different generations. The Royal Navy started fitting catapults quite early to their ships, and therefore you had some which were comparatively, by the time you get to World War II, rather low powered in comparison to others, which is why you have different aircraft types. The lighter aircraft go off the lower powered ones. And some of the lighter aircraft aren't structurally strong enough to go off the more powerful ones. Causes fun. Sir Thompson at 2 o'clock. Thoughts on military applications for water bombers? What modifications would you make in order to increase their offensive capability? If I was going to use water bombers, especially the fire ones for operations, It would depend what I'm loading them with. If I am loading them with a whole load of well, I wouldn't be loading them with water for starters, because that's not really going to make a good thing. But and I probably legally can't load them with chemical or biological weaponry. So yeah, it would be a lot of bombs. A lot of bombs. Blanket time. Jeff Beeler, the World War One Raider Wolf had a float plane that was very useful, unlike the Arados in World War Two. As a Brandenburger thing, the Arados were useful. They just required a lot of maintenance. Lots of other raiders have used float planes in World War One and all sorts of things. Usually, when you have an aircraft, it doesn't make you that good a raider, because actually the operation and maintenance of the aircraft and the facilities it requires makes you stick out as being something other than a merchant ship. If you're trying to hide yourself as a merchant ship, if you're a warship, it's fine. You're not trying to hide it. In fact, in that case, aircraft can add to your ability to hide, because they can allow you to keep the enemy at greater range and spot them when they are. That's right. RN ship. I've answered that one. Okay, Donna Fritz. In the age of missiles, do you really need some super maneuverable plane? A Sea Dart-like plane looked loaded as a missile bust. That seems reasonable. It does. Kilo 119. Watched an interview with a pilot of Sea Dart. Said was highly unstable and tried to kill him every time he flew it. There are many aircraft which have had that, and it doesn't surprise me. Most of these aircraft, especially these ones which are built on the cusp of technologies, are inherently very dangerous, because they are really needing of the technologies as they're going to mature. And in no aircraft needed fly-by wires, computer-assisted control more than the Sea Dart did. Paul Johnson, did the float planes from battleships, cruisers from opposing sides ever dogfight each other whilst on spotting duty? I don't think they ever did. There is a story which I was chatting about the other night on Discord, which is that a pilot of a 109 seems to have been shot down by another aircraft in Norway. And according to what I was told by one of my friends who's done the historical research on this, and so I haven't, so it's them and I'm retelling their story. The only aircraft which was in the air at the time in that area was HMS Warspite Swordfish, which does claim it shot down something, apparently. So, therefore, a Swordfish shot down an ME-109. The story goes that the ME-109 was pootling along and didn't realise where the Swordfish was, and so the Swordfish managed to ambush it, which is quite funny. Okay. I don't think Winkle Brown did fly the Sea Dart. I'm not sure. I don't think he did. I think he got to fly the aircraft I showed earlier. The what was it? The Saunders Row. Ian Carr, how about Blackburn Rock float plane? Useless on on wares and even more so on floats. Yeah, and we also the Rock float plane. No. But you've got to remember the Blackburn Rock is ordered as a turreted fighter, because if the Royal Navy orders a turret fighter, they can that gives them coverage for ordering what would be a dive bomber, which is the Blackburn Skewer. So this is why the Rock is quite so bad as it is, because basically it's a skewer, which was a dive bomber. Well, it was called a fighter to get it past the RAF. I would still argue that seaplanes are, for most part, obsolete for most long-range planes, and helicopters are just better at that role. I would say you're probably right, to France's fault, but again, I point to my ecotourism idea. And I also point to the fact that there is an advantage sometimes in having a capability which other people don't. And the thing is, your long-range planes work, but they have to, they either have to land or people have to jump out the back of them with equipment. Your helicopters work, but they have to land or people have to jump out the back of them with equipment. And they're far shorter range usually than planes. Your seaplane, it can also land, but the thing is, it also has to land or people jump out the back of it. But the thing is, it can land on water, which is a lot more ubiquitous than an undefended, unsecured airfield if you want to put in some heavy equipment fairly safely. So this is why I talk about seaplanes. Also, if you want to hide them, airfields these days are quite well watched and quite well known, and seaplanes are slightly more difficult to track because you can set up facilities which can hide them when they're on the land, or when they're they're at sea level. Let's put it this way. Seeing what USN kept large seaplanes for a time. What ended that effort? Basically, the realities of budgets. Senpai, I think India is buying some Japanese float planes in the near future. I have heard that too, and that would be pretty darn cool because those float planes are a pretty good aircraft. Those the big sea boats, which are, if we skip through here. I love this one, this Italian one. Yay, there you go. There's another Japanese one, which was pretty cool, the Aki. E-16A, 1944-5. That's a pretty cool aircraft. Hey, Busha Buddha, thank you. Frosty, you left off the Martin PM5 as well. The PBM was more capable than PBY. I would agree that, but I prefer the PBY, and there's a limited number of space. Kim McGuire, why not a float plane F-35? They have thrown everything else into it, even if it doesn't even really make sense. Seriously, it's skin and salt water that close. Emin, you believe AN6M2 stats like you believe Japanese heavy cruisers are 10,000 tons. I like it, Eamon. Dave Byrne, still hoping to make those in the nicest way t-shirts. Yeah. So basically, the nicest way is code for, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but this is not going to be kind. See, my favorite model was last year's Timler seaplane tenders, handled 3 or 4 PBM. Yes, on deck, so hoisted on and off. Yeah, PBMs are cool, but I prefer the PBYs. I like my Catalinas. Mainly because there's a beautiful white one sitting at Duxford, which I like to go and say hello to occasionally, and just sort of wave at. And occasionally get pictured in front of. Right. JP, you see the Grum, Duck, and Goose a lot in movies and TV shows. Makes them seem ubiquitous in World War II. Odd for post-war aircraft. Yeah, that is the case. Dust Clark, how about from Golden Eagle? How about flying boat tenders today? They can be modular construction and could be easily converted for other purposes. Well, that'd be the thing. Again, it could be very easily put together. They could be very, very easily put together in terms of supporting them, and they could be little container systems on Mexi floats almost. Ken McGuire, Dan Freeman, yeah, it would take a lot of dollars to design a float plane with radar stealth abilities. So it better start yesterday. JPL, the roof was an anti-flying boat and land ship attack aircraft. There are lots of ideas for what the roof was for. Basically, as I describe it, it's an interceptor. But the trouble is, flying around it was the P-38. So, in the nicest, I'm going to say in the nicest way again, it needed to have been designed. If it's not going to be able to be fast, you've got to be designed strong. If you can't go fast because of your design, you go strong and well armed. And it wasn't those two things. Martin Doherty, such a shame the Saunders SRA-1 never went anywhere. It is a shame. It would have been a cute aircraft. See, Mike, I like the amphibs PBYs. Did some of the shorts mount similar gear in the end? They mounted all sorts of things in the end. The Sunderlands were used for all sorts of little jobs. This is the really big girl. The Hughes H4 Hercules, or as we all call it, the Spruce Goose. Built in 1947. And it is colossal. Absolutely colossal. And I think one of those aircraft overlapping it is the Virgin Galactic aircraft. And there are all sorts of different aircraft overlapping it, but it's still fairly humongous compared to them. It is the yellow one, which is slightly shorter, wider than pretty much everything else with its wings, and it's just cute. Albert Morrison describes a Catalina that shot an Emily in Guadalcanal campaign. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Stuff like I was thinking spec drops insertion, multi-mission drop by a bay and a baby spooky, possibly in one airframe. Yeah, they could pretty much do whatever you wanted if you want to build them. If you consider the H4 Hercules did work. Goodness gracious me, it did work. Expensive and massive, but it did work. That it did. Right then. Tis Russell, did Lockheed try and sell an F-104 seaplane? I don't think they did. Jefferson, mature technology. Turn off Mach 1 planes like MiG-21, B-58 Hustler, and E Lightning, and used to shake violently at high speeds. They did. Martin, the point is to add capability to UK, even calm seas. P-8 can't land and has to call for a chopper or a ship, where a seaplane can land, and if its base can't be bombed. There are advantages, but it's something which I would love to do, but I'm not going to argue for because, frankly, there isn't the money for it. There's enough money. There isn't. Honestly, you need to argue for the budget that is, and you need to argue for maintaining capabilities we have before we start arguing for new capabilities, which is what always guides me when I'm talking about defense procurement and I'm making the case when I'm talking to people for it. Jefferson, interesting story on B-58. John Denver's father was a pilot who set many world point speed records. He regularly fell asleep during buffeting and would have had to be woken by his navigator. Vision, could the Shinmei US-2 do some of the missions of the Boeing V-22 Osprey as well or better? It seems a safer aircraft. Yeah, probably could. It couldn't land in some of the built-up places, but it could probably do quite a lot of the carrier onboard delivery in the middle of the sea. Frosty, the hull shape required for water operation compromises aerodynamics, unless the hull was composite, would also compromise the radar signature for modern combat aircraft. if you're building a modern fighter, I don't recommend, this sort of operation. But if you're building an aircraft which is basically a cross between a C-130 and maybe the duties of anti-submarine warfare patrol and long-range maritime patrol, I don't see it as a problem. I think it probably works well for them, actually, but it's if it's built for it. The Spruce Goose really was massive, and it really was a gorgeous aircraft. I haven't ever managed to see it. That's another thing on my list of things. There are so many things. I have got to visit the States and go full tourist and go around visiting a lot of these things. You've got many. I have to remember, if I'm in America, there are railroads. In the UK, there are railways. But both are built on permanent ways. But lots of ships, lots of aircraft in North America I want to go see, and lots of steam trains. Great something. As I said, if the sea state is calm, the P8 still can't land. I think I've read that one. Some of these quotes get repeated twice or so. Let's see. Jerichen. Martin Doherty. The Argentine Navy has ships that capsize in port. All well and good having an SF, but good luck getting them somewhere without much transport. That is the other thing. You can have all these things, but if you don't have the ability to get it there, it ain't going to be much use. And that is the real problem. That is the real problem in all these things. It has to actually be able to get there. Angus Sonnet, would the H4 have had an easier time operating rough seas due to its size, or would her structure fold with from wave action? That was never tested. Certainly Hughes thought she would be okay, but tested, so we don't know. And if you want to meet the scariest seaplane in the world at the moment, that's the AVIC AG600 for me, because that thing can carry quite a lot of weight. It can do quite a lot of stuff, and if you consider the island campaign which China is setting up and looking at in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, that thing will be very, very useful. Very, very useful. Frosty. Dornier made the Sea Star in about 1990. Twin PT6 turboprop, could carry 12 passengers and had a composite hull. Interesting. Lucia Bennett, that's Clark. I shudder to think how fast the float plane version of the Ju-52 flew. Talk about tempting target. Yep. Donald Fritz, can the frame of a C-130 handle landing on the sea? I feel like the airframe would just fall apart. C-130 is a pretty tough airframe, so if it was modified, it probably could. As for the Argentinians, I wouldn't make too many jokes about them. They're taking on some very, very nice French patrol vessels. They are buying all sorts of equipment at the moment. And they might have managed to get through their economic woes and be starting to regenerate their military, which usually is a time which the people down in the Falklands start to get worried. But, we can always hope. We can hope. And this was, of course, the Privateer Industries Privateer, which is a fairly cool-looking aircraft, let's be honest. It is fairly cool. Consideranos, come visit us in the US, just not now. Yeah, it'll be a while. Ken McGuire, obviously the Museum of the US Air Force in Dayton. Possibly, yes. Come on, everyone. The Doctor is being diligent always. Only 1972. We can do less than that. Thank you. Please, Stafford. I do like likes, but mostly I like the fact that you're all watching. and talking and chatting away, and I do enjoy that most of all. I like having people to chat with. Right. So, right then. The P8 can land on water once, but not take off. Well, yeah, they won't take the whole float that long. Seeing like famous story of evacuated nurses from Bataan. The PBY saved itself using one hind end seated over. Yes, that would be one sitting over the bullet holes. Yeah, that would definitely work. Dave Burnham went aboard the Spruce Goose when she was Long Beach. Yes, absolutely colossal. Trent Delanco, Lieutenant Lawrence R. Herron, USN, had radar hunting PBY-5 Ferret working for MacArthur's Section 22 Radar Intelligence Agency. It operated from 7th Fleet tenders from the winter 1944 until disbanded in May 1945. Very cool. Donna Fritz, speaking of South American navies, the poor Venezuelan patrol boat that was sunk by a cruise ship when it tried to ram the cruise ship. Well, you know, the cruise ship was big and heavy. And an icebreaker. Basically, don't ram an icebreaker. They are designed to ram stuff. This transfer would have using strategic bombers in Coastal Command made many seaplanes obsolete. Obviously, in some cases, the seaplanes would be better, but you know what I mean. Bombers were used in Coastal Command, and they were used a lot. But the fact is, if you could have both, you'd have both, because it's always more fun that you sort of have both, because then their capabilities complement each other. You know, if you can have Liberators, that's great. But if you can have the Liberators, the Catalinas, and the Sunderlands, then you have a very useful group that you can use. Seth Thompson, Dust Clark, regarding the privateer, would there be a front view? I'm curious to why they have separate pontoons rather than a bulked hull. I have to say I was curious about the same thing myself. Let me see if I can hunt down the privateer's page. Well, I think you're going to be quite excited at Stafford. With this. There you go. Just put a link to the Privateer Industries web page in the chat. Don Fritz, how do you maintain a float plane seaplane while on a World War II ship? Seems always damp, salty, and just not a good place for engines. A lot of effort. No, some aircraft are built for it far more than others, and some really do actually manage to work quite well in it. And you can heat them out, you can clean them, you can do the maintenance on the engines undercover inside the ship. Some of the ships even have hangars, and it works. It's viable, but it's not easy. It's like it's not easy today. It's it's the other running thing. We've got currently going on debate in this country over aircraft that are aircraft carriers. And people often forget that one of the extra costs when you're building aircraft which will operate off an aircraft carrier is that the aircraft's bits have to be made so that they can survive the saltwater atmosphere, the salt heavy atmosphere of the air above the sea. In that it does its own corrosion. It corrodes things far faster than the ones on land base. So you need to have them protect against it, otherwise you're going to have a lot of trouble. And this costs money. So thank you. And Martin Kenny. Maybe you and Drakenfennel can come to America at the same time. Hello, Austin. I don't know. Possibly. It'd be quite nice to go with a pal. But there's lots of potential options for going to the States. And a pal to go with me. I know I have promised my girlfriend that when we went round Belfast, that if ever I go to Canada to see Haida, she can I take her with me as well. But looking at my bank balance, that might be a while away. But you know, it's a nice dream, and it's something to aim for. And for those who don't know, HMCS Haida is the last remaining tribal class destroyer in the world. So I'm very motivated to go see her. See what? Big Martin China Clippers used the side floats as fuel tanks. Efficient and got more buoyant as the flight went on. Yeah, which was really helpful when landing. Dave Brenner, for steam locomotives. Visit the B&O RR Museum in Baltimore. Cool. The Privateer is pretty. She is a very pretty aircraft. And, okay. If they consider sticking rockets on a C-130 for rapid takeoff from a football pitch length runway, I'm sure the planes were fairly strong. That is what I'm thinking myself, and I think you could probably turn them into float planes if you wanted to. Frosty, my father built PBMs and P5Ms through World War II and after. Working to overhaul P5Ms, the ones based on Bermuda were the worst as they were not fresh water. There was not fresh water to flush them off after landing. Not surprising. That area would be terrible for them. Steph Thompson, if air travel is still risky, perhaps hopping on Queen Mary 2 for crossing would be more appropriate. Lovely again, but I've seen my bank balance. I was asking, you can also come to Poland to see ORP Bazanka and Granada. Yes, and that is again on my list. I have a lot of Polish pals, so going over there to see Poland would be quite nice. Danny Freeman, slightly misunderstood what you said about her and Haida, and worry you might try to steal her if you go to Canada. Look, I promise to return her in good shape if I borrow her. I'll sound last until we build our own tribal. But what would we name it? If I was going to name a tribal these days, the question would be: would I name it give it a current name, or would I name it in honor of the tribals which fell in World War II? And I'd honestly be tempted by HMS Nubian if I was going to name it by the ones which sort of went through World War II. Mainly because Nubian lost her stern and survived the whole war and got more battle honours than pretty much anything else. If her battle honours were counted the same way as Warspite's were, she would have beaten Warspite about twice over. See what? Go to Blue Angel show and watch Fat Albert take off. Never seen it. Yeah. Fat Albert is cool. I often thought the Fat Albert taking part, the pilot who actually has to fly the Fat Albert has to be better than all the rest of the Blue Angel crew. Because honestly, to do those tricks with Fat Albert, that's taking it to another level. There is one thing being able to flick around an aircraft which is supposed to be able to flick around in the air. It's a whole nother flicking around an aircraft which is definitely not supposed to be flicked around in the air. Jeff Ealer, how often in wartime is spotter aircraft used successfully? Not a lot. Because they had a time period where they would have been very useful. If there had been a major war in the 1920s, they would have killed it. In the early 1930s, they'd have been absolutely important. But by the time you get to World War II and you start to get radar and all these things coming in, it's less so. The Battle of the River Plate, definitely they're used for that. But, you know, it's not as common as it was prophesied, because if you consider 1920s and 30s, early 1930s and most of the 1920s, they would have been absolutely critical. By the late 1930s and World War II, you're getting radar, and suddenly spotter aircraft aren't that useful because the radar can see about as far as you can shoot. Tom's right. Sunderland's was still being built in the 1960s. Airfix ones, anyways. Yeah. Yeah, the Airfix, I think the more recent model of the Sunderland is actually better for the Airfix model, but I haven't built it myself. Vision. Baltimore has both B&O Railroad Museum and historic ships with the Civil War US Constitution, the submarine US Torsk, a lighthouse ship, and the US Coast Guard cutter Tanny, a World War II Coast Guard cutter. Oh, cool. Martin, has anyone made an AUW seaplane? Could be useful fleet asset. No, they haven't. And again, that's another thing which could have been quite cool. They have theorized it. It has been looked into. Seth Thompson. Okay, Jeff Beeler. Not sure Haida is that mobile these days. She would be. Trust me, I've spent a lot of time mentally in the engine room of a tribal going over those engines. I could make her mobile. Golden Eagle. How about using flying boats and converting them into refuelers? That would actually definitely be viable. You know, they could definitely do secondary roles for flying boats. Could be quite practical, and also, if you think about it, could free up airbase space. Paulzax is still going. Yes, if flying boats are still a topic, have we covered the USN Seamaster, an amazing plane that really stokes the imagination? No, but actually, I do have that picture saved for if anyone asked about it. You might have noticed that some pictures pop up, and that's because, honestly, I took some and I thought, well, I'm not going to include those, but if I am, and we are going to talk about it enough, the P6M and the 6M, I am going to actually lift it and put it up. And I have a really cool photo of the P6M, which I found. Right then. There we go. We have the P6M. Now, the P6M is a pretty cool idea because the P6M Seamaster is, as some of you will know, built to prove the strategic concept of a strategic bomber as a flying boat. They built 12. The first flight was in July 1955. They had a crew of 4. They had a humongous garment, but let's leave that to one side. They had a maximum range of 1,810 nautical miles, which is pretty darn cool. 4 Pratt & Whitney J75 P28 turbojet engines, providing the equivalent of 312 kilonewtons of thrust. 312,000 newtons of thrust. Had a maximum speed of 596 knots, or 686 miles an hour. And a combat range was decided of 650 nautical miles, carrying a 14-ton payload, or 1,500 nautical miles with 1 air-to-air refueling from its tanker variant, the P6M2. They are cool. Very, very cool. And, you know, they're where these things can end up. And honestly, they do end up, and they do look very good. Right. Get it back to normal slides going through. Make sure I don't miss that. So Golden Eagle. So there is the P6 is your proof of there were tanker variants of this. So there are proof that tanker variants can work, and it was used. It was tested. Frosty, amazing for today. The Martin Mars did not have powered booster controls. No, it didn't, and it's massive. Very fast succeed. Dogs Clark. In the 1960s or thereabouts, US ended testing landing C-130 on carrier for carry-on-board delivery. Had to use fighter pilots as the Air Force transport pilots weren't crazy enough. That doesn't surprise me. But I think they use test pilots, and those are always a crazy bunch. They're lovely, but they are crazy. Angus O'Sonnell, Dogs Clark. When are prop-driven aircraft better than jets? Usually if you want something for long-range endurance and ease of maintenance, prop is usually easier to maintain. It's also usually cheaper. And in considering these days, you can probably make a propeller-powered aircraft electrically powered. So you could theoretically make an electric aircraft. Think about that. Well, there have been some solar-powered aircraft made, but you could make something probably battery powered, huge battery powers, and some sort of solar panels, etc., to charge them a bit. But electrically powered, eco-friendly propeller flying boats would be great for ecotourism. Jeff Beeler, USN World War I shore bombardment was a big user of spotter float fighter planes. Yes, but I would argue that that's not really using them as they were intended to do. They were supposed to be intended to use as for sea battles, and I would also argue that they also had land-based spotters who were also doing things on the ground, who were doing it. So it was often a mixture of the two. Don Fritz, I got to spend time in USS Texas engine room, and it was scary. Could not imagine it being when the engines are on. It's loud. Actually, that's one of my favorite things. If you go to HMS Belfast, they actually turn up, and the volumes on the engines do not actually go as loud as they used to go. I know they claim it on the speakers they go as loud, but they don't because of health and safety reasons. They don't go as loud as they used to go, and the noise goes up tremendously in the engine rooms at some points. It's on a loop to experience it, and it is cool. Tis Francois. I'm still of the position that the Rosadyne, they're not just principal helicopters, could have been great and could have been float capable too. Yes, and there were some I think built though to be float capable. Also better when you need to keep weight down. SMPI, seaplanes do bring up the possibilities of using Bond-style hidden island bases. Could be an interesting idea. Yes, they do. This is one of the reasons why the Chinese are investing in them. Golden Eagle, fuel consumption of turbojets tends to remain constant at different speeds. Therefore, you might as well fly them fast since consumption is the same. Yeah, broadly speaking, because you can pitch the propeller, and that can have quite an effect on speed. Mission notes: imagine P6M bombers and tankers in RN service during the Falklands War. Well, for starters, they'd have been in RAF service, but it would have been fun if they'd been in RN service. But even if they'd been in RAF service, they'd have been pretty interesting with that range and capability. I don't think you could have quite flown them from Ascension, but you could have possibly based them out of South Georgia once you recaptured South Georgia. Getting them down to South Georgia would be an interesting thing. And there is South Georgia's got some very interesting rough water, but there is some spaces where you could possibly land and take off from. I wouldn't like to try it too much, but it could be interesting. Could be an interesting thing. Frosty, my understanding was the P6M was killed by inter-service rivalry, as only the Air Force was to have strategic bombers. It was killed by ballistic missiles. Once you got SSBNs being planned, you didn't need it. Gross Salty, one of the airlines around Vancouver is testing a DH Beaver seaplane converted to all electric for short local trips. Cool! Osprey 28, yes, and I actually had a picture of the Sea Dart up here a short while ago, chatting away about it. It is cool. Paul Zalski, Polaris made it obsolete as in its theoretical job, but she could have been used for so many other applications. That's often the trouble. When you have an all-or-nothing philosophy infect your armed forces and infect your government when it comes to defense, you often have problems when it comes to seeing what things can be done, and you often have waste entering. It either does this or it does nothing at all, because there's no point in having it if it doesn't do this. And you sort of go, well, actually, that's a waste of money. You've spent all this money setting up and developing this. Could use it for something else. Would it be useful for something else? Why aren't we using it for something else? It's all or nothing. Kind of like the Caprino CA60 Transero. Yes, before anyone asks, that is a 9-winged flying boat seaplane. I have no idea what to describe that magnificent creature, but it's certainly interesting. Props have increased their consumption at higher power outputs, but when used at low speeds and altitudes, are able to use low power settings. Again, it depends on how you're angling the blades. That can have quite a big effect on the airflow, and depends on your propeller design. If you're going for 6-bladed, 3-bladed, all sorts of options, and also you can always have a contra-rotating system set up as well. Sims, after night, I think the RFA Argus should be converted to a seaplane tender and the Swordfish float plane replay built. Cheaper than F-35, more entertaining. Definitely on the more entertaining side. I'm not sure about the cheaper to build than the F-35. Mainly because we haven't got any tooling for the Swordfish built currently, whereas we have got the tooling for the F-35. Well, you don't know. Tooling might not be that costly. Kevin McQuarrie, they need to find a way to put more wings on that. Only one was built. But, you know, I know I was doing mainly the military ones and all these sort of things, but I just couldn't resist it. When I found it, I just went, no, that's got to be in any presentation I'm doing this, that's got to be on this. I'm going to use it with my aero engineers next year. If I get to talk to, when I get to the lecture, they're going to get that, put it in front of them and go, yeah, at least you'll never be the people who design that. These are cute. These are just so cute. I like the Italian Schneider trophy entrants are just so beautiful. They are, as I've said earlier, they are the Ferrari. It is better. The Ferrari of the Ferrari concept brought into aircraft form. Danny Freeman, Caproni, CEO of 60 Transero, flying canal barge? That'd be cruel. Says Pie, could the V-22 Osprey be converted to a seaplane? Would the VTOL capability reduce the wear and tear on the floats and thus make it a bit more economical? Yes, the wear and tear would reduce it. Could it be converted into a float plane? I don't see why not, but it's actually making it work. And actually, I was half joking earlier, but honestly, when I was thinking about it, if I was going to be designing a VTOL replacement for the Merlin, you know, based around the sort of the fling wing system, I would certainly build it to have the ability to land and take off from water, because I think it was the next level of advantage that you could build into an aircraft. It's Fran's fault. Speaking of Polaris missiles, they may well also start becoming obsolete in the next 10 years. Well, they're already gone. We've got Tridents. It's Fran's fault. but I think I know what you're talking about. I think you're talking about hypersonic missiles, and possibly not. These things are lots of things have a report of being made obsolete. The things with the Trident, with the ballistic missiles. Does anyone really want to make them obsolete? Does anyone really want to have a new, better method of mass destruction, or do we want to leave it with that known methodology? Vigilant. Caproni and his seaplane was in animated film The Wind Also Rises by Hayao Miyazaki. Yes, Japan has built many, has done many movies around, animated movies around the concept of seaplanes and flying boats. It's quite cool. Thomas Ryan, I have to go. Need to be ready to watch Dan Snow's Battle of Britain TV program at 9 o'clock. Thanks for the discussion. Take care. So you're not going to be watching Mysteries of the Deep? Don't worry. Understood. But remember, Mysteries of the Deep is tonight. That's why I'm going at 8:30, because that's at 9 o'clock and I want to get some tea first. How, Golding on the clock. How is Dr. Singh Han Lo? I think I know who you're talking about, but I'm trying to remember what his name is. I think he's doing quite well. I think he is. If it's you see, the thing is, once you're a lecturer, you rarely usually call people by their surnames, and so I know a Singh who I chat to occasionally, but I honestly can't remember his surname. So I think the person you're talking about, if you're talking about the person at Kingston University, is very well, thank you, and is doing well. But I cannot remember if it's his surname, so I could be talking about someone else. Paul Zach, Schneider races just so beautiful. That they are. See, my on the nine wings would work if they were swept backwards, supersonic. Oh, don't get me started on that idea. Gone Eagles, commonly known as Sing Low. Yes. Thank you. I think it is the Dr. Singh I talked to, and he's doing fine. He's doing well. Jeff Beal, Erectoplanes, threat or menace? I would say neither. I'd say they're more a menace to their operators than an actual threat at the moment. Donald Fritz, Dr. C, have you ever listened to Dan Callan's Hardcore History? I have once. I don't think I've listened to it recently. Vision, the whole point of SSBM is deterrence. Not all bombs have to make it for it to be effective in that mission. A lesson on the BBC's Yes, Prime Minister. That is the point, definitely. The transform. What I mean is that Polaris missiles were predicted to be able to be intercepted by around 2030, and considering the US only managed to intercept slow missiles only recently, yeah, it ain't happening. Thank you to Transform. Steamlight Vision, old enough to remember that the tour of one of those Fords to all the tour of one of those Fords to all the leaderships in hundreds of gawking teens like me glued. Yeah, I have to. I admit this gets me into trouble because my girlfriend is a hardcore Aston Martin fan. She is really a massive Aston Martin fan. I do like the Aston Martins, but I like the fast Ford slightly more. If I was going to buy one, it would be the fast Ford, not the Aston Martin. Principally because they're wider, and for some reason to me, the Aston Martin I think is a beautiful object, but I just want to stare at it. I'm not sure I'd want to drive it. I'd be worried. It looks fragile. Whereas the Ford looks like I could chuck it around corners and have a lot of fun with it. But what do I know? I drive a Subaru, and I love that. And I've also had Volvos, and I loved them as well because no one looked at you in a Volvo. You could do whatever you liked in a Volvo, and no one was looking at you because you were driving a Volvo. So they all presumed stuff about you. But of course, I always obey the law and drive responsibly, as should you. Just remember that my cousins are watching. Have you ever seen the Dole 31? I think that was probably on one of the ones I did look at. I've gone through quite a lot. Basically, I started off with a list of myself, and then after I'd exhausted that, I decided to be naughty and go to the Wikipedia list of of aircraft and went through that list as well and worked through everyone I could find. See if anyone's I spotted which one on the Wikipedia list. That was good for me. Anyone's I hadn't spotted but were on the Wikipedia list. That was also good for me because it meant I still spotted them. Go on, Eagle. Will do. I'll pass on the regards. I'll pass them via my sister, who talks to him far more often than I do, as she's head of the foundation year at Kingston University. She's in charge of all the engineering students in the foundation year at Kingston University. She has one of the most nuttiest jobs known to mankind. Grace asking, elsewhere on YouTube, there is a Japanese video of a radio-controlled Caproni 9 wing, including water landings. Search for AR-60. Oh, cool. Tim Pavlov. Trying to weigh up in my own mind the infrastructure delta if we RAF bought US-2 versus more P-8s. Where would you base them? Oh, where would I base them? Well, your options really are Scotland or the Southwest. That's where you're talking about basing them. So, actually, I think I'd base them. I would base them up at Faz Lane. Yeah, I'd base them at Faz Lane with the submarines. That'd be quite cool. They'd have a lot of fun there. Stafford Thompson. Dr. Clark, sorry, meant Kabuki mast, and for Stovall, I was thinking something like the Quinjet from Marvel. Very cool. That's what I was sort of thinking about as well when I was thinking about the next generation of what comes after the Merlin, what comes after the MV-22. Ken McQuire, well, it's been estimated that because of a wire safety, that at least half of the Polaris warheads would have been duds. Not that that matters for deterrence. Yeah. Crusty, the Convair R3 wide Tradewind was also left out of the discussion. There are so many to have in the discussion. This is the thing. I could have been sitting here listing types forever. There, as I said, so I listed the ones which I thought were interesting and would illustrate different things, and that's what I went with. Peter Barrington. Peter's cool. He's my sister's boss because for some reason they decided he was the most senior head of engineering, head of a department. So my sister, who's head of the combined foundation year for all the engineers, civil engineering, surveying, wherever they're coming from, aero, mechanical, the whole lot, all the foundation goes through, is under my sister's direction. She got moved from civil engineering to have it under Peter, with Peter as her boss. So it's quite a cool system. And she has got a lot of fun teaching them. Nick Waters, think my favourite car story might be that the father who was well off but chose a Skoda just to annoy his daughter. I was actually once told by a young lady who I was technically line manager of at the time that better cars meant made for better drivers. That if you drove a nicer car, you must drive better than if you drive a less nice car, which is why they chose to train with a company which taught learner drivers to drive in BMWs rather than the company which was highly recommended, which teaches people to drive in what were Vauxhall Corsas. She didn't understand why I couldn't stop laughing because I thought she was honestly making a joke, as it was a serious point, which she decided with her friends at school. Mitch notes, the problem with any type of anti-ballistic missile system, you can overwhelm it with sheer numbers of incoming targets. That is the problem for all these things. You have to attack. The only chance to defeat the ballistic missile is to really take them out in the boost phase when there's far less of those targets, or preferably before they even launch. Steve White, before Japan invasions, we wanted in USA Japan, Jags, Aston Martins, Triumphs, and T-Birds and Corvettes. Personally, I wanted Triumph. The little Honda 50 was cool. The Honda 50 was cool. Jeff Beeler, German mail seaplane catapult ships and planes. They had so many things going on with those. Again, as I said, I could have included so many different things. Calm Gasmet, Repolaris, considering that the early Soviet ICBMs were alcohol fueled, rumor was that they had about 50% readiness rate at most. You know, we like a drink. We are Russian. No. I am. The alcohol they used was definitely not drinkable. Also, in my experiences, a better car tends to encourage worse driving. In my experience, it depends on the driver. There are drivers who are excellent, and no matter what cars they're in. There are drivers who, frankly, whenever they offer me a lift, I go, oh no, I really need the exercise. Sam Thompson. Actually, my exhibit was the traditional experience of footballers in this country and very fast cars. Back in a second, someone's just calling me. Fine. I'll allow that. Right. Sorry, that was someone calling me to tell me about I'm getting tuna sandwiches for my tea. Seeing as I cooked them a nice chicken casserole for lunch, you know. Just can't get the standard service. I'm gonna get killed now. This is why I need to build up brownie points. Okay. Since it's Cian, I hope I'm not mangling your name. Kant Z51 attack on New York flying sloop. Here is a brilliant weapon. Sloop. Flying hubris or brilliant weapon from alternate timeline when Italy doesn't suck. Right then, it's an idea. It's one of those things. Let me get my picture up. I have my picture saved in here, but it's where do I have it? Ooh. Right. There it is. All right then. Sorry, that picture was a bit more buried than others were. There we go. Right then. So, there was an idea put forward that Z 511 could attack New York. Now, there are a few issues with this, and one of them is the fact that, in the nicest way, it doesn't really have the range for it. Stay up, notes. It's amazing. The notes are actually more difficult to find than the picture was. And the notes are in one long word file, which I have got pictures and pictures and all sorts of things in. Right now, so the range was 2,350 nautical miles, and honestly, it isn't going to go anywhere near that. It is going to be, if you're doing this sort of attack on New York, you need a lot longer range, a lot longer point of action, but also you have a small problem. Because if you go that full way, you can take 4 tons. Maximum is consider it can carry 4 tons of bombs. But if you want to go that long range, that full range, you're pretty much taking 2 tons of bombs. So if you're turning up with one aircraft, and it is a great kind of like the Graf Spee down in the South Atlantic. It's a great psychological operation if they manage to pull it off. But actually pulling it off requires you getting a base in the middle of the Atlantic, really, to make it viable, and it ain't going to happen. But it's a nice idea, and it is a cool looking aircraft. But I think they only really get one into service. Jeff Beeler, Warspite Swordfish at Narvik was the Warspider float planes. Yes, it was. Basically, at Narvik, you have Warspites, you have tribal destroyers, and you have Warspite's float plane going, hello. This first one, it is actually. Oh, there's a few forms of two. Ah, Nick orders. Is that Swordfish just about the biggest seaplane mounted on the battleship or similar? No, it wasn't. There are a few more. There were a few more. We go back to them. There are a few more like that, and it was fairly cool. Definitely a very capable asset, but not the biggest. Not even the Walrus really was the biggest. I'm not sure. Is it between the Sea Otter and the Walrus? It will be between the Sea Otter. Walrus is probably bigger than the Swordfish, and I think it's just about bigger than the Otter, just about. But Supermarine built some very good seaplanes for the Navy. So, what if air-to-air refueling wasn't perfected in World War II? Tech not that advanced, and fighters need that range. Could have been a factor. Air-to-air refueling really isn't perfected that much in World War II. I don't think it isn't even. Let me just check, because my memory is it comes in just after World War II. Air-to-air refueling takes place first in the 1920s. But really, it slowly gets better and slowly gets better, and it's not really... Oh, good lord. There are some really weird systems being used even in 1949. Basically, the air-to-air refueling as we know it doesn't really get started properly until the mid to late 1950s properly. So yeah, World War II I wouldn't really call for any air-to-air refueling. In fact, frankly, the systems they're using look positively dangerous. Frosty, I had read that the best stealth car for speeding was the Volvo DL Turbo Swing. Volvos are, fun cars for getting around. Jeffy, the Italian flying boat trip to the Chicago World's Fair was interesting. I'm sure it was. Italians turning up in anything is interesting. They turn up in pretty cool aircraft. Separate berth with the Fuckwolf 200? Yeah. They have a similar approach to a similar problem. To be fair, I saw some idiot rev his AM to impress his press in London for his head gasket to explode in smoke. I would say AMG, BMW, Lambo are the worst. I will defend BMW drivers. Mainly because my girlfriend used to have a BMW. Albazarski, Japanese used to use subs to refuel their seaplanes, I think. Also, I-400 type subs carried their own seaplanes. Yes, they did, and yes, they did. And lots of nations experimented with seaplanes operating from submarines. It was considered a very cool idea of how to multiply them. Unfortunately, then most people then bumped into the realities of: have you tried to be on surface for long enough to dock and recover your seaplane, or to launch and to put it up and unfold its wings and for it to launch? Either of these options take a lot of time on the surface, which is not a good place for a submarine to be. Calvin Gasper, count S511 versus New York. If you were refueling at sea by submarines, might be worth a few strikes just to tie down a lot of home defense fighters. Maybe, but it's going to be a lot of effort, and honestly, you could be using those submarines for other things. Well, that was the point. As disruption, it's the American bomber. Even if they got it to work as intended, it really wouldn't matter much. That's the point. It would be a psychological operation, like the Graf Spee when it's down the South Atlantic. If you look at the Graf Spee, every time its major kills are where there are not major sea routes. Because at this time, while it's down there, the Italians are not in the war yet. So British trade is still going through the Mediterranean and out through the Suez Canal. You have the big trade routes down the South American coast, and it's sitting off the coast of Africa. It's doing a psychological operation, and it's the same with this. If it had attacked America, it would have been a psychological operation. So anyway, the big German boat, Viking. Think the ace that sank it wanted credit for 4 planes at least. Probably deserved it, considering the size of the aircraft. Bullsax, one is... Albazarski, so deploy a sub with fuel and booms, and voila, you can do repeated bombings. I'm surprised the Japanese didn't bomb West Coast with their I-400s just for propaganda instead of playing with balloons. It's the Japanese. They seem to be, honestly, through the war, there seem to be some really strategically weird decisions going on. And these are the people which turned the Zero into a float plane. That abomination. Seriously. Every time I see it, it just makes me more annoyed. Mainly for the poor pilots who had to fly it. Gonning, is that how come Renown and LaHood look so similar? I'm not sure why. Probably that's, pretty much you get a design style going on. And there's all sorts of ideas going around. And you do tend to go with some sort of previously built things because it's you're building on something which is existing, so it's considered you're de-risking your project. Dust Clock, Sea Otter was just about the biggest of the 3 you mentioned, though they are about the same size. I thought it would have been the Walrus, but yeah, you could well be right. I'm not looking at my notes on those particular aircraft at the moment. I'm doing it from memory. Also, I really wouldn't know about cars, except I get hit by expensive cars more. I use an electric bike to get around. That's very good of you and environmentally friendly. But when you're a historian and you cart around with you a load of books around the world, cars become very useful. They don't build bikes which can take that much stuff. And the most bike action I tend to get is my sitting on my gym bike, which I have down in the house. Well, let's put it this way. Old one gone, new one arriving soon. So most one will be that one when it arrives. Tenfold. Who carried the biggest float planes? I guess the IJN carried the most in World War II. Actually, the RN possibly and the USN definitely probably carried more float planes, but I think the IJN possibly did have the biggest. I think the IJN did have some fairly big ones, yeah, on there. So I think theirs were bigger than the RN USN ones. The RN never used a Catalina or anything like that as a float plane, although it would have been fun to watch them try in terms of from ship launched. It just had the mental image of a Catalina being launched off the deck, off HMS Victorious or Formidable. That'd be cool. Carmen Gasmond, can't say if Z511 versus New York. It's just a Doolittle type. We can do it. You have to react. Yeah, I suppose. I'm always amused by the idea that some think airships could still make a comeback. I just don't see it. I saw one person do a very, very lovely demonstration about airships, and these were going to be helium-filled airships being used to take over the logistics role of dropping off supplies. And they were completely colossal. And I was sitting there looking and thinking, you do see the problem with this in the modern world, don't you? You do. And they'd gone through and worked out all the logistics and all the supplies, and they hadn't seemed to think that they were taking a humongous target. Basically, in permissible environments, you can usually have a runway and land an aircraft or bring a big ship alongside. If it's permissible enough that you can land an airship, yeah. Who got the best use out of seaplane tenders? I'm going to go for the US Navy on that one. Golden Eagle. Good for you getting Grass Bay in World of Warships. That's a nice thing to get, I think, there. Although, again, I haven't played World of Warships. It's entirely going by what Drac tells me. Stephanie Wilson at Osterham, and they usually whine about I pay for the roads, completely aware that the road tax was abolished in 1935 and car tax was just going to general taxation. Probably. I don't know. There was a Spitfire float plane. Yes, there was. As I said earlier, between 1942 and 44, they were developing them. But I have, if I go back here, there you go. There's the predecessor of the Spitfire, the SB6, which shows you where you've sort of got the Spitfire shape coming from. Because if you do look at the SB6 and you do look at the Spitfire, you do see a lot of very similar things going on there. And a lot of the construction techniques were used. Michelle, IJN did conduct one bombing mission against Oregon with I-400 Southern float plane, trying to set forests on fire. That just seems a bit pointless. It's nasty to the environment and doesn't really affect most of the things you're needing to produce in war. Take care, Paul Zacks. Right then, I've got 10 minutes before I have to go and get my tuna sandwiches for my tea before I go and watch myself on Mysteries of the Deep. We can all be confused, scared. Jerison, I just worked out I've had 14 accidents the past 7 years. 5 in the past 12 months. Realistically got hit by a pedal bike in the rear and another bike over the bonnet. I'm not sure, Jay Richardson, you should be driving or on the roads. That's 5 accidents in the past 12 months. 4 in the past 6 months? I have great respect for you, but I'm worried about you on the roads now. Could you send up a flare if you ever are out on them? Frosty, the Japanese used seaplanes refueled from subs to attack Pearl Harbor in 1942. Yes. So meet Emily and Ruth. And we don't talk about Ruth because that just sends my blood pressure high. Daniel Freeman, launch a PBY Catalina off a catapult on a battleship like Warspite? For the look of it, nothing else. It would be cool to look at. JP, the armored carriers, when did they get Walrus and how? Okay, well, actually, they start getting Walrus quite early on, in about 1943, mainly in terms of search and rescue, and for picking up down pilots, and for a bit of carrier on-board delivery of post and things like that, and for communication ships. Usually, they were the ones which were from their actual task group, so they would use for other things as well when they were on board. So they'd usually have a couple wandering around, and it became quite a thing that they were there. And then they could be sent off to to one of the cruisers if they needed to be stored elsewhere, so you could carry more aircraft. But they could visit the carrier when they wanted to. Greg Sussy, if you have enough air superiority to land an airship, you can probably land a C5 or a few A400s. Yeah, that's the case. Eamon, what do you think of the IJN doctrine to use float planes from cruisers so the carriers could focus on strike? I can understand their logic behind it, but honestly, I see it as a problem for the force as a whole. I can understand their logic of it. I'm just not sure I think it's a sensible idea, basically. I think history bore me out that actually having the capabilities of reconnaissance and not using the cruisers was sensible, because it means you lose. You means you both don't have the thing I think about. If those resources had been used instead of doing that to those cruisers being left as cruisers, and they'd use the resources to make more carriers, then they'd probably been in a more advantageous position. But I can understand their logic behind it. I just don't think it was probably the most sensible. Carl Massman, Admiral Graspy in World of Warships, their broadside armor just begs for Citadel hits even 6-inch guns. It's from Strong. The thing is, helium was stable and inert, was heavy compared to hydrogen. If you want to do anything with weight, you need hydrogen. Yeah. No, we don't want to use hydrogen. We really don't. We don't. No one wants to use hydrogen. It just, no. Airships, no. It's just not a good idea. Okay. Seth Thompson, Clark, 10-minute warning question. Really like what book did you? Although to me, question. Really like what Brooke did for you. Although to me, there is still one class of ship missing. Thank you. And I did like what Brooke did. So thank you very much to Brooke for doing that picture for me. For the earlier one I did on the sort of the Navy's operations and the Protective Task Force. Frankly, it was very nice. There are lots of options you could have put in there, but I was going for a fleet which would do global projection, and that was definitely enough there to do that. Sensitian, and I'm sorry if I keep macking up your name. The Italians also meant to refuel from a German cow in the Mid-Atlantic. I can understand that, but I'm still not sure about it. And also, landing in the Mid-Atlantic to refuel, that's going to be fun for the aircraft and fun for the submarine. Gone Eagle, where is Mysteries of the Deep? What channel? It's on Discovery Channel, and it's on at 9 o'clock. And I have no idea what number that is because I watch it through Amazon Prime. Carl McGasman, Jerison, accents, remove that magnet from your car. I was tempted to suggest something earlier as well. Atomic Babel is literally just sending me cool aircraft names. Wildcat, Helldiver, DC-3, all those were you able to use as float planes, yes. But they all make more sense than a Zero. Dan Freeman, Dr. Read Japanese seaplanes act. Roofless? No, just roof. Yickers. Arriving late, starting now, thanks in advance. Thank you. Disfrontal. The fastest I've ever travelled on a bicycle, 65 miles per hour. It's a fun experience. I can imagine it's scary though. 20 commando with a few tons of audience around faraway supply posts. That is, again, what I'm thinking of when I see this. The AG600. When I see that, I start to think, what are the Chinese planning for it? What can it be used for? There are lots of potential options, and it's a very useful system. Having an uninsured pedal bike hit your car as a nightmare. Yeah, they also having people crashing into parked cars counts for 4 accidents. Ouch! Seriously, Jay, buy a tank. At this rate, it'll save you. I have had that experience, though, of being a parked car which has been hit. It's not fun. I've also had the experience of someone actually pulling out over 2 lanes of traffic, hitting me, and then trying to claim it was my fault. And I was sort of going, I was in the middle of a dual carriageway, driving along. You pulled out from a side road and actually managed to hit me in the tail. You know, there is a car moving, not me hitting you in your tail and you pulling in front of me. You were actually pulling into the back of me. So, and because I was the youngest driver, the insurance companies did presume I was at fault. It took quite a lot of fighting and the police coming in on my side to get them convinced it wasn't. Fun times, insurance. Right. Disgruntled. As seaplanes were quite large, could seaplanes have been able to launch multiple torpedoes at once? They often were able to carry 2, but they could be designed to carry 3 or 4. And they would tend to drop them in, and they could launch them quite heavily. I think at one point there is a Sunderland which is recorded having dropped quite a few more than 4 in one go, but the crew had done some modifications, some heavy modifications. But that was Sunderland crews. They were kind of like sloop and corvette crews. Their aircraft got modified. How common was the B&V Viking? I think there were only about 13 aircraft built, 12, maybe 12. I don't think there was that many of them built. There was only one of the 238s, though. Jerison, the one at fault was... Sean Mack at Dutch Clark. I wonder if Drac could get you one of the Naval History panels World of Warships have started doing. I'd love to if they wanted me. I do enjoy. I enjoy chatting naval history at any chance. Disgruntled. But when it comes to cycling, I always do my best to follow the rules of the roads. I hate when there's a dozen traffic lights in a row. It kills the legs. I can imagine that. Honestly, myself, I don't like cycling on the roads, and it's like I don't like kayaking in rivers because any of the good kayaking spots tend to have people on them. This is why I like sea kayaking. I can ignore humanity for a couple of hours or longer. I have, though, I used to with my previous poodle. I haven't done it with this one yet with Raleigh because he hasn't, the floppy research assistant, because he hasn't been old enough yet. But I'm going to start training him to go in the kayak probably next time we get down to Cornwall. And I have actually gone for 3 or 4 hours, me and the dog off, kayak from bay round to next round a couple of bays to the nearest to the pub, had lunch in the pub, steak for both of us, chips only for me. Actually, the pub I go, they do this too in Cornwall, does have iron brew. So iron brew and water for the dog as well, and then kayak back. And you know, it used to be a fun thing to do with a dog. But people used to look at you going, "Is that a dog sitting in the front seat of your kayak?" Yep. Happy as anything. Curl up, sit there, watching the world. Occasionally woof at seals and birds, but wouldn't really didn't jump out of it. Fun doggy. Calvin Gaspin. AVU's AG600, one can even stuff in a small SAM VLS in 1 or 2 just to make fighter pilots agitated. Yeah, you can do a lot of things to them. Golden Eagle, I've been living in China now already if it wasn't for the virus. Jerison, I also got rear-ended by an old lady who did minimal damage and 2 bits of damage from unknown cause, so presumably hit. Vision. Only auto accident occurred when a co-worker backed into me at an intersection because of a scary truck making a wide turn. No damage except license plate bolts left 2 holes in her bumper. Ooh, fun. Right, it's now 8:30, so I'm going to see if there's any last questions, and then I'm going to go. Dusk Clark, did Roger Keyes have some sort of special favoritism for the Warspite? He just loved her. He just loved her. That's it. Dav Thompson, we'll send you my type up on TS Endeavour once it's done. The doodle is on my Discord. Oh, cool. I've got to respond to you with your with my notes on your battlecruiser thing. Sorry, it's been distracted by not being put together because I've been dealing with renaming pictures and making sure captions are correct for the book. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Our dogs do have seatbelt harnesses. We've always had seatbelt harnesses for the dogs because they don't go in cages in the back. And Mum never trusted it, and growing up, because she was always worried if they were in a cage in the back and we got hit, they'd get sealed in and she wouldn't be able to get them out. So they've always been seatbelt harnesses. We've had them for about 30 odd years. Take care, Aaron. Take care. Paul, IJN have a love affair with seaplanes attaching floats to everything that would fly. Why were they so far behind in using as an ASW platform? Also, thoughts on the IJN use of magnetic anomaly detection? The IJN didn't really get MADS to work that practically soon, but once they did get them work post-Second World War, they did some really good stuff with them and on their seaplanes. And why they get attached to everything with fly? Well, because they're worried they're going to lose carriers and they know they're going to be fighting an island hopping campaign. And islands don't tend to have runways built on them. They do tend to be surrounded by water, so it makes sense. It does make sense. Take care, everyone. Enjoy. Thank you. Take care, and hope you enjoyed the introduction videos, and have a nice evening. Take care. Thank you. Let's go to... Take care.